I've been living in Portugal for over a year now, and I can't believe this is my first video about Lisbon. Today I'm taking you with me and showing you some of my favorite places in this magical city. We'll explore what to see, eat, and the best places to drink. Lisbon is often called the San Francisco of Europe because of its steep hills and the famous red bridge that looks just like the Golden Gate. But there's so much more to this city. Lisbon is one of the most beautiful cities in Europe. It's a perfect mix of classic elegance and a young vibe of art galleries, cute cafes, and rooftop bars. So let's dive in and explore it together. The first thing I like to do when I get to Lisbon is to head up to where you can get the picture-perfect views of Lisbon, and there's no better spot for that than Mira Duru DP viewpoint. The vibe here is amazing. Always lots of people hanging out with friends and a beer, couples being romantic, and street music. I love walking up to this spot because it takes you through some of the most amazing parts of the city. The narrow alleys, colorful old houses, and all that wonderful Lisbon vibe. As you make your way up, you'll see photos on the walls of some of the houses. These are part of a project that is all about preserving the history of the local community, especially in neighborhoods that are changing very fast. I think Lisbon is a city made for walking, but fair warning, there are lots of steps and steep climbs, so make sure to wear comfy shoes. And if walking isn't your thing, don't worry, there are plenty of other ways to get around and still enjoy the city. The best option for sightseeing is taking the iconic Tram 28, which passes through most of Lisbon's historical attractions. So you can get on and off wherever you like. It can get very packed during peak season, but for a very good reason. These trams were originally used in the 1930s, and riding them is such a retro experience. They've been renovated beautifully inside. Wood paneling, vintage leather seats, a metal steering wheel, and the squeaky sound of the old wheels makes it the perfect nostalgic experience for just a few euros. So it's definitely worth the waiting in line. Another charming and iconic way to avoid the stairs in Lisbon is to take the Elevador de Santa Justa. This is a neo-Gothic iron lift that connects the Baixa downtown area to the neighborhoods up on the hill. It's a lovely ride because you get to see the panoramic views of Lisbon. And if you prefer a more efficient option, there's always Uber and Bolt, which are actually a great option in Lisbon because the ride prices are some of the most affordable in Europe. Another way to get around Lisbon is by tuk-tuk, imported all the way from India. But honestly, even though you'll see lots of tuk-tuk in the city, I wouldn't recommend it because of the bumpy cobblestone streets in Lisbon, unless you have a very strong stomach. Right next to the viewpoint is the historic church of Convent of Graça. Don't miss it because it's one of the most beautiful churches in Lisbon. Inside, you'll find Baroque architecture and gilded woodwork that catches the light beautifully. And the chapels are decorated with traditional Portuguese azul blue tiles. Now we're heading downtown to one of my favorite spots in Lisbon, LX Factory, where they've taken an old industrial complex and turned it into a cool hub filled with art galleries, cute stores, trendy bars, and stylish restaurants. This place is such a vibe. And my favorite store in LX Factory is this charming bookstore, Lir de Vaga, which in Portuguese means read slowly. I think it's such a wonderful reminder in our hectic world. And yes, they've got a cozy cafe and work tables, so you could easily spend the whole day here reading and getting some work done. There's no better way to end the day than with a glass of Aperol at a rooftop bar. Lisbon's got plenty of lovely rooftop bars with live music and a great vibe. This one is called the Icon Bar. It was a bit windy and chilly, but the views of the Tejo River and the Ponte 25 de Abril Bridge made it totally worth it. If the bridge seems familiar to you, it's because it was built by the same company that built the Golden Gate Bridge in San Francisco. The design, the color, and the structure are similar. It was originally named Ponte Salazar after the Portuguese dictator at the time, but it was renamed after the 1974 revolution. Good morning from Belém Tower. If you want to avoid the crowds, come early because this place gets absolutely packed later during the day. Belém Tower was positioned strategically to protect Lisbon Harbor and to serve as a formal gateway to the city. It was built 500 years ago and designed by a military architect, and it is now a UNESCO World Heritage Site. Next to Belém Tower is the Jonos Monastery, which looks as if it's come out of a fairy tale with its tall, spiky towers. It was built in the 16th century during the prime of Portugal's golden age of exploration. Just a quick warning, Lisbon is generally a very safe city, but if you're crossing through the park between Belém Tower and Jonos Monastery, that park is a bit of a hotspot for pickpockets. They often dress like tourists and work in pairs, one distracting you while the other one snatches your stuff. I've personally been approached like that a couple of times, so be very careful. Yes, and this is the line to get inside the monastery at 9:30 a.m. The walls of Jonos Monastery are covered with detailed carvings of nautical symbols like ships, ropes, seashells, which all go back to the significance of the ocean for Portugal during the time when the Portuguese were a nation of explorers, discovering places like Brazil, Africa, and Asia. After all that sightseeing, you'll probably need a little bit of energy boost, so I've got you covered. Fábrica de Pastéis de Belém is a famous bakery which is considered to be the origin of the Pastel de nata, probably Portugal's most famous pastry. You can expect long lines any time of the day, but it's totally worth it. The recipe of the pastel de nata dates back to 1837, and the story goes like this. The monks from Jonos Monastery used egg whites for starching their clothes, and they didn't know what to do with all these egg yolks leftovers. So they came up with this custard pie recipe, which has stayed a secret to this day, at least the original one, and made Portugal famous for pastel de nata all over the world. You can grab a seat at the back of Fábrica de Pastéis de Belém, but it's usually super crowded, so I like to take my pastel de nata and enjoy it at the Starbucks next door with an iced matcha green tea and a sprinkle of cinnamon on top. Another iconic spot in Lisbon for pastel de nata is Castro, which calls itself Atelier de Pastéis de Nata. Don't ask me which one is better because I honestly find it difficult to decide, but I'm having a lot of fun in the process of figuring out. Carmel Convent used to be one of Lisbon's most beautiful Gothic churches until the big earthquake hit, which happened in 1755 and turned it into ruins. This wasn't just any earthquake, it was a catastrophic 8.5 magnitude quake that caused tsunamis and fires and destroyed 85% of the city, killing about 1/3 of the population. Carmel Convent was left roofless, open to the sky on purpose in memory of the big earthquake. At this point, if you're feeling hungry after all that sightseeing, Timeout Market Lisbon is where you want to be. It's a modern indoor market that has every type of food you could think of, from traditional Portuguese dishes to fresh seafood, decadent desserts, and wine tasting. I went with some classic Portuguese port wine, which always works for me. I just love port. Next up is Rua de Bica de Duarte Belo. I don't want to overhype it, but this street has been named one of the must-visit streets in the world. It's got everything you'd expect from Lisbon. The vintage yellow trams, a super steep cobblestone street, colorful houses, and a tram station covered in blue tiles. So, all the charming motifs of traditional Lisbon in one place. No surprise that this street is one of the most Instagrammable spots in the city. The tram here is called Elevador de Bica, and it's one of the most famous symbols of Lisbon, with vintage vibes and breathtaking views of the city and the sea. Now let's catch a perfect sunset spot. Mira Duru dos Portos do Sol. This popular viewpoint has panoramic views over the red-tiled rooftops of Alfama neighborhood and the sparkling Teju River. And the name Portos do Sol means Gate of the Sun. Isn't it beautiful? I hope you enjoyed spending 48 hours with me in Lisbon. I've been lucky to travel to many amazing places, but Lisbon holds a special place in my heart. Sending you a big hug from Portugal.